Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. It's great to have all of you joining us from across the internet today. We're streaming live on 12 different platforms. And thank you for taking a little bit of your time to join us as we talk about political leadership today. We talk about the 3 laws of performance and how they can apply to politics. And we're going to take on some of the news of the day and talk about that. But what I'm most excited about is that for today, this week, we have Sean Bartley joined us as well. And Sean, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Glad to be back with you. Glad to be with all of you. Missed you earlier this week, so really just appreciate all the thoughts and prayers. We really appreciated that. So.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people out there really do care about what we're doing here and the leadership that you provide and the kind of difference that you make. So thank you for who you are. And I know that I'm not the only one who really appreciates what you provide here. And so folks have been reaching out all week and letting us know that they're praying for you and caring about you and your family. And we do appreciate that because ultimately this is a community. This is a community of people who are dedicated to empowering political leaders from across this country to be able to be the kind of leaders who can make a difference for this country, as well as be the people who reignite American patriotism. So thank you for all the lovely the messages this morning. Some good mornings. Great to have you back, Sean. And we have good morning, gentlemen. Nice to see you, Sean. So people really do appreciate that. So thank you very much to everybody for the kind words and everything else. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna let people know a little bit about what we're doing on the show. We're gonna do a little bit of a different format today. Not too much different. It'll be similar to what we did yesterday. Just want to encourage people to put your comments and questions wherever you're watching on the internet, whether it's YouTube or it's on Facebook or it's on wherever it's at. Post your comments, post your questions. If we don't get to your questions or comments in the show, then we'll incorporate those into further episodes. We're going to start probably having people drop in here who are new to running for office, people who are, have just filed the paperwork. So towards the end of each show, we're going to make sure that we answer any questions that you have about running for office. I also want you throughout the show to post questions about, how can conservatives, Republicans, or really anybody talk about the issues that are going on in the news? Yesterday, people had questions about how to talk about January 6th and what's maybe the high ground maneuver. Maybe something from a very popular episode we had last week that we can bring to that. So we're going to talk about the headlines here first, and we're going to talk about the three laws of performance, and then we'll do the question and answer, and so just throughout the show. Join the conversation, and we really do appreciate that. On the high ground maneuver, that was a really popular show, and I saw that on Periscope and Twitter, our numbers really jumped up, and that's because the author of the book that we were talking about, Win Bigly, Scott Adams, liked our tweet on that over there on Twitter, and so a number of people discovered us over there. It increased, I think, by tenfold the number of people who watched that episode over there. So I'm glad that he got the acknowledgement to the work that he's done, and that it's brought in more people watching the show across the internet. So with that, if you are interested in being a Political Trade Secrets insider, making sure that you can always stay informed as all these different platforms rise and fall, get taken out by their opponents. I saw yesterday the Parler CEO was let go, and who knows what's going to happen there. We have a decent budget in our advertising budget for Parler that hopefully they come back. Hopefully we can get our money back. I don't know. We'll find out. But if you want to get exclusive stuff, go to politicaltradesecrets.com. You can watch the show there live. every day as well. Just click on the top. There's a banner that says "Click to watch Political Trade Secrets live," and you can watch it live there. So please do that, and we'll keep you in the loop. And with that, Sean, would you like to tell people about our sponsors?
Absolutely. Look, hey, if you are thinking about running for office, or you're considering, like, how can you make a difference, especially in this political climate, well, reach out to us. It's olsonstrategies.com, OLSON strategies.com. Email me, Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. We'd love to have a conversation with you about what it'll take to make a difference in your community, the state, the country, or even the world. And we're also proud to be sponsored by Grassfire. What does Grassfire do? It's all of the one-on-one, human-to-human interactions that a campaign can have. Look, maybe there's some law in the books that you don't like, that you think impedes on your freedom. That's very likely so. If you want to take action on it, call Grassfire. Look, they do the petitioning to actually get your issue onto the ballot. You get one shot at it. Make it count. Canvassing. This is the interaction at the doorstep, or live calling over the phone with a real human on the other end having that conversation. It makes a world of difference. So reach out to Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us. What else does Grassfire do? They fuel 10centtexting.com. This is your way to connect with voters, constituents, where they are on their mobile device. 82% of people open every text message they get. Why not make it meaningful and impactful, and deliver some punch with it? And so that's what 10 Cent Texting does better than anybody in the business. So reach out to them today. And I'm looking forward to the conversation we're getting ready to have about the 3 laws of performance, and how we can really deliver, how you can really have impact with every conversation you have, and actually get to the actions that make a difference in life and politics everywhere. So
yeah, it's gonna be great. And one of the things that we're gonna discover as we talk about this is the power of language, and the power of how you speak actually influences reality for people. But with that, let's hit some of the things in the news. And as we go through this conversation, as we go through what we're talking about today, please do post questions as to anything that you're interested in learning about in the news, anything that you're interested in hearing what our takes are on, maybe how you can talk about it, either as a candidate or as a political leader out there, as an activist, how to talk about these topics in a persuasive way, such that it would make a difference. I mentioned earlier the Parler CEO was terminated by the board. You know, I check my cell phone every once in a while to see if Parler's back. It's pretty remarkable. This huge platform was taking over as far as social media, and just the experience from the beginning of December to the end of December was pretty remarkable. That, you know, at the beginning of December, it was like a tree fell in the forest. No one was there to hear it if you put out a parlay, as they called it. And then by the beginning of January, just a week before they got shut down, there's like really robust activity happening, such that we wouldn't put an advertising budget. I did. And anyway, and then they promptly went out of existence. And you can tell it seemed like there was something going on. And, you know, there's more to the story. And now the Parler CEO has been terminated by the board. It seems that there's a fight as to the direction of the company and where they wanted to take it. I don't know, Sean, if you've heard much about that. If you have any thoughts, just in general, about how oftentimes there's something missing in the news story, and you just kind of wonder. So it's like looking for the dog that didn't bark.
Well, it's interesting. You know, we think that the news and political news in general is, you know, lacking.
Mm-hmm.
I think nothing lacks more than business news.
Mm-hmm.
First off, there aren't a lot of people who do it.
Yeah.
It's awfully difficult to be able to get the inside story of what's going on. Almost impossible.
Mm-hmm.
yet it's posed in such a way that you're getting all the information. Like that is the way it's written. So it really makes it difficult to kind of wade through it. And now with the CNBCs and the Fox businesses of the world needing content, I think it really shines a light on the amount of lacking in that area. And things like Bloomberg, that used to be their job.
Yeah.
And now they report on politics half the time, and so there is a lack of mission in these things that seems to have hurt in these areas. You combine that with the difficulty here. So I always take these, especially when it's no pun intended, but parlor intrigue stories combined with something that are the inner workings. I have no doubt that there's something missing in the stories we've gotten so far on why the CEO is let go. And it's not a big surprise though that there would be some sort of struggle when what you are is a platform and you aren't allowed to do your main source of business.
Yeah, totally. It's so this is one of those cases. It's a story that's both business news and political news, which are both rife with problems. We talk about when things get into the political media filter, you really can't trust information anymore. It's basically what's happened with the climate change news story, the stories in general around climate change. Everything has become so politicized on either side that you can't really trust the information. That happened with the China virus and so on and so forth, which we're not supposed to call it that now because they did an executive order. But the Chinese Communist Party virus, we're not. So anyway, just whenever something gets into these filters, it's a problem. And you saw it last week with how the business media covered Robinhood and GameStop and all of that. They seemed pretty ill-equipped to provide people with real information. You almost get the sense that the people who write about this and speak about it in the news, these are journalists in most cases. Rarely do they actually have a background in this, and if they do, there's somebody who's brought on as an analyst, and they're being paid by somebody. In some cases, a hedge fund. That's one way they short things, is they come in to say things to affect the market. So you have a lot of manipulation. It seems the business and stock market news is just as rife with people trying to manipulate things, and it has a really big impact when it comes to business news.
I'm glad you brought up how they reported on Robinhood in particular, because what that really shone a light on, though, is that even if they aren't necessarily being paid for a point of view, the problem that they do have is that they need these hedge funds. They are not going to Reddit to get information about what's going on in businesses. They're not going to everyday investors or day traders or anything else. So where do they need to go to get their information, right? Well, they got to go to the places that are doing the bulk of the business. It's just like these these sports gambling shows have been popping up. They don't go to two guys sitting at a pub who bet on a game occasionally. Who do they go to? They go to the sports books to talk about. I mean, that's who they go to. And why wouldn't they? But you also got to guess that their job is to make sure that they've got bets on both sides. That's their job. So what are they going to tell you? So I think it's just realize what's going on out there.
It's a whole new avenue. I think I mentioned in their conversations last week that there's a whole world of fake news when it comes to the business networks and CNBC and whatnot. There's a whole world of fake news there. There's a lot of people who are trying to tell you how to view reality, and that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today. Actually, how to do that in a positive and empowering way that makes a difference. But a couple of other issues on the news. And as we talk about this stuff, as you have questions, we had a couple of really good questions yesterday about how to talk about certain things. I'm going to read a comment here. By the way, more nice comments about having you back, Sean. People have missed you, so thank you for
thank
being
you
here today.
Really appreciate that.
And you'll probably be back on again next week, right?
Yep.
So I don't want to give away the secret information I get from signing up with Olson Strategies, but can you address term limits and why they don't work because of chiefs of staff? I get so much great inside information since I've signed up with Political Trade Secrets. Well, that's a really good question. So, we have a bunch of stuff happening on Capitol Hill right now. We have the Liz Cheney surviving the leadership challenge. We have the stuff today with Marjorie Taylor Greene that's happening. But, just imagine if you had term limits on Capitol Hill tomorrow. It would probably work about the same. Now, I've gotten to the point where I think it's probably, anything you can do to shake up the system is a decent idea to at least look at. But one of the things that will happen if you have elected leaders be term limited, people who run the show, there's a whole legislative legal services that write all the legislation. Those are people like lawyer bureaucrats are down in the basement that nobody really knows, but they write most of the legislation. You have the chiefs of staff will practically would become basically the member of Congress. There's a lot of members of Congress who pretty much, they like the trappings of the office, but their chief of staff ultimately makes a lot of the decisions. So it's one of the potential trade-offs that if we had term limits for Congress, that you would have a professional class that really runs the show. They have more of the information. They're the ones, and oftentimes they are in power largely because it's a fundraising question. Members of Congress hate raising money, and they would like to outsource that. And so they usually get a chief of staff that they can outsource that to. And then that person is the one with the power because they're the ones with the real influence. Sean, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah.
And we're not saying that we necessarily would be against term limits for Congress. It's just this is one of the things that you would do. You'd empower the bureaucracy in the Capitol and the bureaucracy in the executive branch.
So I'm of two minds on term limits. I totally see why people want them. Mm-hmm. Like they want a change, and I give the voters a lot of credit. They could not actually send a clearer message. Like basically every election cycle that they want change. Like almost everyone now. It is almost a thing. But people say, oh, why do 90% of these people get reelected? Well, and they say, well, it's got to be because of term limits. Well, there's a lot of factors involved. Mm-hmm. I think one is, and we talked about it here, getting connected with your district makes a difference.
Yeah.
Like you can really weather a lot of other things if you're doing that. Constituent services make a difference. Like, hey, I might not ever vote for another person of whatever party, but they did help me get this benefit for my mom, and so you know what, that's good in my book. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of stuff like that happens that you kind of look at. But I'll give you, I live in a state with term limits, Ohio, and there are people who have spent my adult life in the state legislature. They just move from the House to the Senate, to the House, to the Senate, and then that's just what they do.
And there's a lot more professional staff too, right?
There is,
compared to other states.
Yes, yeah, there is. But the thing that we still see is who actually ends up getting more power is the executive branch. Mm-hmm. And the executive that's really where these bureaucrats.
It's not necessarily the governor.
That's right.
It's all the agencies and all the bureaucrats in the agencies.
And it's people who work in these agencies. And, look, if you've got 8 years to do something like you do in Ohio, nothing wrong with that. Yet you say, you know what, I want to make a difference on, name the issue. Maybe it's water rights out in the West, or maybe, here it could be something agriculturally. Well, you call the agriculture department. And they have a legislative liaison, so they're appointed they're a political appointee by the governor. But, the hundreds of people that work at the Ohio Department of Agriculture, some have been there since the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And they go, oh, this is just the way it is. And this is just the way it works. And you say, well, wait a minute, I'd like to kind of do this. And they go, oh, no, you can't do that. And, and then you decide, okay, is this the battle I want to deal with? And they'll give you all the reasons that it's been done the same way it's always been done.
Mm-hmm.
And, and they've been doing it. But there is no one that is elected and accountable for whatever that thing is that you...
There's a lot of people who are avoiding work. That's one thing that they're trying to do. There's people who they've been surrounded by constraints. This is one of the things that I think that President Trump, of course, we talk about being the leader who can see possibilities or is willing to see possibilities where others may only see constraints. And the bureaucracy tends to surround themselves with constraints. That's a lot of what their job is. Oftentimes, that's what a chief of staff does for a member of Congress. Is they're like, nope, you can't do that. We tried that 8 years ago. This is the reasons, blah, blah, blah. So you end up with this perpetual system of people who are new to town trying to figure out where the bathrooms are, and then they're gone. And the whole time, the chief of staff is the one who has the influence. That being said, we have seen in the last few years, and I think, you look at Donald Trump, as much as we don't like her and think she's the worst, AOC, and we'll talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think I'm getting her name right.
You are.
She's definitely not a role model for conservatives. However, there is something to be learned by some of these freshmen. I think of Trey Gowdy. He came in. There's more opportunity for all-stars. If we can break this idea that you have to come and serve and do your time. I think we're driving back from North Carolina this week, and we were listening to Rush Limbaugh. And Rush Limbaugh was going on about this. He's talking to somebody who had run for office and wasn't successful and was thinking about running again. He's like, just do it. He's like, if you're passionate about this whole idea of like wait your turn, this is not the time for wait your turn. So I think we're seeing a shift that's happening, and that is you're getting some bold people. We had Lauren Boebert on the show a few days before the election, and we're happy to support her and to do what little we could to at least get people in the kind of the upper echelons of the party to get a look at her and see that she's a really credible person who is bold, and she's already making a difference. Now, I will guess we're going to talk about Marjorie Taylor Greene in a moment. As I said, I don't think she's your role model for conservative leadership. However, she's definitely getting attention. And I will tell you, if there's somebody who ran against her in that runoff, we don't know who that person is. But I can tell you one thing about that person: they're boring compared to her.
Absolutely.
And she won because of that. And if you have really good ideas and you're the one who has a little bit more of a level head, well, you're going to have to figure out how to be interesting, because otherwise you're not winning.
Well, and I think that's great. And speaking of Lauren Boebert, she has drawn another career politician that would like to not see her in Congress. Yeah. Carrie Donovan, the Democrat state senator out there, is going to be running against her. And though you got to give Congresswoman Boebert credit, she does keep defeating career politicians along her way.
This will be her third.
Will
be her third, or possibly she might get a primary. You never know. Then she'll have 4 under her belt in 4 years or 3 years. Pretty impressive. It's just she knows how to get attention, but not just get attention in the way that some people do. She gets attention towards a purpose. She's really started getting people's attention when she had her business, Shooter's Grill in Rifle, Colorado, that every one of the servers had a sidearm. And so she made a statement. It was good marketing. And Rifle's not a big town. It's not really easy necessarily to get to. And people knew about Shooter's Grill across the state, across the country. They knew about Shooter's Grill because she was making a statement, and I guarantee you that was good business. It was also good political maneuvering, and it got people's attention. Then she made attention when she stood down Robert Francis O'Rourke and Aurora on the Second Amendment, and she got a lot of attention there. Kind of Joe the plumber, is that the
Yep, Joe
guy?
the
Yeah,
plumber.
who took on Obama. Kind of that kind of a moment. So she always is doing this stuff in towards a purpose. I don't know if that's something that's innate, intentional, or what. We know there's a lot of good people who support her that are around here, and a lot of people that we really like and think the world of. We had Laura Carno on to talk about communications, and she was a supporter. Shauna Cohn Bamberger was also a big part of her campaign. There's a number of people, really great people, who are a part of her team that have helped her make a difference. So, she's making, I would say she's by far, now maybe it's different today with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but in the last few weeks, Lauren Boebert has by far been the most noticed and the biggest leader as far as the new members of Congress, the freshman class this year.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I agree. And bringing up Joe the plumber just made me think about how that 2008 campaign had so many shotgun unions.
Yeah.
Between McCain and Palin, McCain and Joe the plumber. It's all these people who probably didn't necessarily want to be together.
Mm-hmm. And all the time, John Weaver's there.
Yep.
Yeah. So actually, I don't know if he was in that campaign. I think they may have known that he was a bit of a.
They were all too old for him.
Oh God, that's disgusting. Okay. Don't elected candidates bring in their own cabinet members. I think their own staff. Yeah. So no, they typically don't. They usually hire, for sure. They hire a legislative director who has a lot of experience. That would be the first bit of advice. And actually, that's the advice I would give somebody: is hire a legislative director that is going to be somebody who has a lot of experience. Now, that person oftentimes is an Eeyore. They're going to tell you can't do things, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. But still, they know the rules. They know how things work. They're a good person to have. Oftentimes, you have people coming in. They want to get an experienced chief of staff, somebody who's been around and who can tap you into all the different special interest money. That's a pretty common thing. And then the other folks are going to be likely legislative staffers from other offices that are looking to maybe move up to the next level. You're going to have some people from your campaign who are coming in, maybe not on issue related stuff. Like your legislative aides are probably going to be people who have some experience. Your legislative correspondents are probably people from the campaign, possibly. It depends. Your scheduler, your staff assistant, probably people from the campaign. Maybe you have a deputy chief of staff who might be from the campaign. You might have your communications person who's experienced on the Hill, or somebody from the campaign. Chief of staff is the one that can be possibly the person from the campaign manager, or it could be somebody who's already on the Hill, or it could be, I've seen people bring in lobbyists. I've seen people bring in other state legislators from their home state, which I don't get, things like that. So.
Yeah, congressional. So, and then now at the district level, like back home, that's where you tend to see a little bit more of your campaign folks or stuff like that, like your people, quote unquote. But in a lot of times there's a disconnect or some battle between the office, and you can have that go on.
Mm-hmm. So you mean like their district staff. So your district director is likely going to be somebody from the community, but they're going to be doing constituent services. They're not going to be really involved in the legislative side. They're rarely going to be involved in the communication side so much. And there's ways that this could all be done differently, honestly. I will tell you that most congressional offices, even just talking to people who've been around Capitol Hill a while, they're pretty dysfunctional, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
It's very rare, even with some of the more impactful members of Congress that you see, they oftentimes have pretty dysfunctional offices. And I don't know why it is. It feels like when you're on Capitol Hill, you go into one office and you're in like a different country. You go to the next office, it's a whole nother country. Like there's almost no connective tissue between them. Depending on the mindset of the member of Congress and their own weird quirks, those all filter through the office. So it can be quite jarring to go from one office to another.
Oh, absolutely. And I think I think that's a great point. And so, there's sometimes some internal struggles there. Especially for new members, because they're moving from a campaign into the legislating. So there can be some things there. The other thing I wanted to say is, like at the state level, do they hire their own staff?
When you
Sometimes
say the state level, do you mean like state legislative candidates?
state legislators once
Yep.
they get elected. Yeah, so sometimes they hire their own folks.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's done by the House or the Senate. Like, for example, I don't know if it's still this way, but way back when I worked in the Ohio legislature, we served at the pleasure of the speaker, regardless of what office we were in. So it was actually the speaker's office that hired us. Now,
Is that the case if you were in the minority? Would that have been the case?
that's the case in the minority too. Now, the way it worked there is that the minority leader would just say, "Here are the people I want in these offices," and the speaker would say, "Okay."
Mhm.
But
So in that case, you work at the pleasure of both the speaker and the minority leader.
that's right. So, but for us, for example, for us, for example, the member I worked for said, "This is the person I'd like to have work for me," and then they did an interview and said, "Yeah, fine." So that was about it. But you know, it was also the case if the speaker's office called and said, "Hey, what's going on this bill?" You know, you know the paperwork you sign says you work at the pleasure of the speaker, and if the member says, "I don't want the speaker to know yet," okay, well then what do you do?
Mhm.
So there were so,
That's definitely, you serve two bosses, and it's smart for the speaker to control all of that. It's not really good for the people
yeah,
ultimately, and that's the kind of thing that you see happen in different states. Is there's these ways to influence what happens around the states. So let's I don't know if there's anything else we want to talk about. Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're having the vote today. I think we both have noticed the hypocrisy that
yeah,
over the last few years, Pelosi and the Democrats really didn't take the squad in some of their ridiculous and hateful and just ridiculous things to task to the level that they're doing with somebody who's new and something that they said beforehand. But what do we say about hypocrisy?
yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It might infuriate you, but it doesn't matter.
I mean, we can talk about it and it can influence ourselves with it, but it's not going to make a difference in the larger conversation.
There's a few things I want to say here. One is the reporting on, Marjorie Taylor Greene's comments. They definitely make it sound like, like this is something she's just now doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back, this is stuff from, a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, whatever. And, I likened it when people were upset about the Access Hollywood tape. Literally, the first thing I heard about it is somebody said, "Did you hear what Donald Trump said?" And I'm like, "No," and like I was just caught flat-footed. And they said whatever, they said what they had heard on the tape, and I said, "He said that today?" And they're like, "No, that was 11 years ago." I'm like, "Oh, okay."
At some point, things are no longer relevant.
Yeah.
But this is why, if you're in a campaign, you have to raise the money to be able to do it. You have to develop the communication skills to be able to capture people's attention and be able to shape the frame, and then also have your message stick with people. Because if you don't, you're going to end up in the situation. It's also, So I don't know. She might end up at some point being an amazing member of Congress. We don't know. She's only been there for like 3 weeks. So, you know, at this point, it's interesting. We're watching basically the hit happen 2 months after the election, as opposed to um, during the election, which is very strange. Just kind of, I think that's something that's a little bit new, to have the hits come out after the
Yeah.
election. Now, I think the Democrats probably were happy that she was elected because they can use her as a cudgel against Republicans. But I would go back to the campaign. This is why we probably are gonna talk about this sometime soon. I'd like to have an opposition researcher on the program. Part of your job as a candidate is to expose those things about your opponent that the voters really need to know. If you don't tell people, they just get a free pass.
Nope.
And honestly, you need to say it in a way, it may not be, you need to give your opinion about it. And this is a great thing about a competitive political process where there's opponents, is you're going to give it from your perspective. Now, you should not lie about it, and you should not exaggerate or anything else like that. But you need to let people know what's there about your opponent, so that people can make a decision. And we're not talking about taking things into the gut or anything like that. We're just saying that her opponent is a um, completely ineffective
Yeah.
politician. I don't know who the person was. I don't even know if it's a male or female. I don't know if they have experience, no experience. I don't know anything about this person other than I can tell that they're ineffective and that she was effective in the campaign. And they never aired this stuff in a way that made a difference. So, and you know what, I would also say for Republicans, you want to be mindful that there might be people who can be a real asset to the cause. But if they have things that are going to be a problem, like they've said some things about 9/11 that don't quite make sense, that might be conspiratorial in nature, well, just use your better judgment and say, you know what, we need really top-notch folks who can make a case for us, and we don't need to be distracted by all these other things. But clearly, that was a failure of a primary, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And um, so you got this in the news, like because if you read these headlines, it's like, hey, this is brand new stuff. It's
Mhm.
not. One, two is the voters elected her, and so this really gets into the what I see as the high ground maneuver here, which is to simply say, you know what, the people have spoken here, um, and they have a right to whoever they want as their representative, and it's not for us as a body to say that they should have um, that they shouldn't have committee assignments.
Mhm.
I mean, and it's and it's also a very DC thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, they already they already worry too much about committee assignments, if you ask me, to begin with, and now they're gonna strip somebody of it. And as one person that a candidate that I've worked with before said, strip me of my committee assignments and I will wear it as a badge of honor to tell you how bad the swamp is in X capital that I won't name. And they were stripped of their committee assignments, and they rode it to a primary victory in a higher race because
Mm-hmm.
they said, I clearly am willing to stand up to these folks when others won't. And you basically make martyrs out of these people.
Yep.
That
Well, it's interesting. We have this on the backdrop of Liz Cheney surviving the leadership challenge.
Yes.
And you have Marjorie Greene now potentially losing committee assignments. It gives you a sense that the swampiness does still have some influence,
And
that Liz Cheney would still survive this leadership challenge. Now, there's also some similarities here, is that she took an action that she thought was whatever she thought was the thing to do. I disagree with vehemently about, but it's the same. I guess in a similar way, it's a similar perspective that is happening from the other direction. People need to be able to speak up. This is a body of 435 members from across the country, all duly elected by their people. Now, Liz Cheney, I think the way that people are handling that back in Wyoming is the right way to handle it. Who cares about the leadership and the this and that and the committee assignments? They are getting rid of her.
Yep.
I think they're going to have a primary against her, and I think that's great.
That's
the way to do it.
I was getting word from folks in Wyoming just in the last couple of days, and they said, yeah, if this stays a one-on-one contest, she's definitely gone.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe even if there's 3 candidates, she could be gone, just the way this is playing out. And just really her attitude about it is not wearing well in Wyoming. And they already had a problem with her basically coming back to claim her family seat.
Yeah.
She's
run against somebody and lost.
Yeah.
She just, it's clear to people that she's really not a Wyoming person.
But what I will say, at least on the Republican side here, not removing Liz Cheney, they have taken no action against Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's not the Republican caucus doing this.
Mm-hmm.
They seemingly on this issue, they've been consistent. It's really the Democrats here who are going to the full House to strip Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments, which is unheard of.
Yeah.
But
this is my high ground maneuver on this is that, I don't have to agree with somebody, and I don't have to think that they're the absolute best person to have in a job. However, what we see right now is this is just more of the cancel culture, and I may hate what you say, but I'll defend your right to say it. And her district voted for her. They put her in that seat, and they expect her to do a job. If they want to replace her in 2 years, so be it. But that's our system. She was elected. She's in that position. She's said things in the past that we don't have to agree with, and she has every right to say in this country. And that's really the long and short of it for me. That this is really the place to be, and this is I've had this disturbing trend over the last couple of weeks. I think maybe I've mentioned a couple of them. I've gotten more in the last week. Just people who have known me from the past, who are, I guess, casual liberals. They just think they can just message me and say the most insane, idiotic things, and then judge me for being a Republican, a conservative, a Trump supporter, this or that. And it's just remarkable that they think, I mean, I didn't even think about just trolling people that I knew from other parts of my life and saying terrible things to them. I just never would even occurred to me that's a thing to do, to just go around and shame people I know that I don't like their politics. It's just not a thing I could ever imagine doing. But it seems as though people are just trying to shut down the conversation, shut people down. And that's the thing that I really encourage everybody to be, is be bold, be confident, and be expressed. You don't have to get it right. I mean, we've probably said multiple things today that, I probably said something the facts weren't right, or I'll change my position in a week. Who knows? I want to get a couple of these comments. Naomi says Representative Boebert was on Laura Ingraham last night. Wow, optimistic and not daunted by the Democrats. I agree. She's bold and unafraid. And Naomi also put a link in there so people can check that out. So that's a good thing. I'll check it out after the show. And then it is really a strong example of why we as prospective candidates should be extremely careful what we post on social media. Everything can and will be used against us, so we should be professional. Well, I think being professional is a great idea. I wouldn't live in fear, though.
No.
I would be self-expressed and speak out. I wouldn't speak out in anger. So there's something there to to deal with. And I think what I would suggest, like if I could go back several years to Marjorie Taylor Greene, is there's definitely something that's going on in the Republican Party right now and in the Democrat Party all over. We've been talking about this for a while, giving people a tool, being able to separate the what is so from the interpretation and the opinion. Most of the news is opinion and interpretations and making meaning, and very little of the what is so. It's one of the biggest problems that's going on. You could almost be forgiven if you thought there's no real news happening right now. I think that's because the news is rudderless without their North Star of Donald Trump. They have nothing to go and light their hair on fire about right now. I don't know if you saw the Babylon Bee headline that 2 weeks of not being on social media and out of the news, that Donald Trump reaches enlightenment as a monk in a monastery. So,
it is my favorite news source.
Yes. So all the fake news is fit to print. It is fake news you could trust.
Yeah.
So with that, I'd like to get into the actual topic that we wanted to talk about today and give people a sense of that. We're gonna just hit this briefly because this is really powerful. This is the book. I highly recommend it. There's a PDF. When we post this on the blog, I will include the PDF of the book report. It's like a short 5-10 page, something like that, synopsis of the book. But highly recommend this book either in the audio or in the physical version. So I actually took a course with Steve Zaffron several years ago. He's the head of a company that is called Vanto Group, which is a professional consulting group. We actually worked with a similar consulting group, actually a competitor of theirs, but used a similar process several years ago to look at our business and to look for blind spots. That was one of the things that we did, and it was very, very, very helpful for us. But the 3 Laws of Performance is his book. And I'm just going to go through the 3 laws really quick and just give you a sense for how this could be applied to politics. And Sean, as I go through this, think about what we might want to tell people about how this could be applied to politics.
Yep.
And then, folks, if you have questions about this, we're gonna just hit the high notes on this, and then maybe do a more in-depth conversation about it at some point. So, the 3 laws of performance and the leadership corollaries. So, their idea is that there's 3 laws of performance, almost like they're physics. They are like the law of gravity, that if you go about being a leader, you go about trying to have an impact in the world, and you ignore these, that it's just like gravity, you're going to fall down. Like it doesn't matter whether you acknowledge it or not, it still has an effect on you. So you can pretend like gravity doesn't exist, but it doesn't matter, is the idea. So the first law of performance is how people perform correlates to how situations occur to them. And then the leadership corollary to that is, and the corollary just means it's a follow-on. Leaders have a say and give others a say in how situations occur. So in this first law, that how people perform correlates to how situations occur to them. This is something we talk a lot about on the show. We talk about kind of the subjective nature of reality. There might be a base reality that exists, but we only exist in understanding our experience from our eyes, our ears, our memories, our everything that we have access to gives us what our experience is. And what they're saying is how a situation occurs to you is going to be based on all of that. So if you have that, we talked about this on the days before the end of the year. Everybody's like, oh my goodness, we're going to get done with 2020. Oh my goodness, it's going to be so good when we go into 2021. 2020 was so bad. When you have that the world occurs to you as so bad, 2020 is the worst, you can pretty much guarantee, based on this first law of performance, that 2021 is going to be terrible for you also.
Yeah, and that's a great point, because things are just bad where I live in this city. Once I move to that city,
Mm-hmm.
things will be great.
Yeah, the grass is always greener. This is the fallacy of that. This law is what is at work in that fallacy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. I was actually thinking about how things occur, and I'm reminded of a story my grandpa told me. So it's a little dated, but uh, he said, he was telling a story about this boy who was given a coin to go see the circus, and the parade comes in first of all of them, and he stands and he watches the parade, and he hands his coin to somebody standing beside him and leaves because he thought he saw the circus. He was like, that had to be it. I've never seen it before. I don't know. So no, so, and he thought it was great. But the thing is, he never actually saw the circus. So, but it's all how it occurs to you.
Yep.
And so really being on the lookout for that. And I think the corollary is great. Leaders have a say, and give others a say in how situations occur.
This goes to the core of how language is powerful and how you speak is powerful. It goes to the Declaration of Independence. We're going to talk about that here in a moment. The Declaration, we talked about this yesterday on the show. I talked to people about how declarations are a form of action. It's speaking something into being. Like, I declare this to be the case. I declare that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is a declaration, and from that declaration, it created a direction for our country. In that moment, like, it created a future, which we're going to talk about in a second. You have something else you want to say about that?
No, that's all I had on that.
So yeah, if leaders have a say and give others a say in how situations occur, so that's basically how you talk about it, is going to have it occur to you a certain way. Now, you can't just do happy talk and have that disappear, how something might occur to you. So we talked about our tool a couple of weeks ago about how to get somebody else, how to kind of take the sting out of someone's opposition. We called it recreating. Really what you do is you get what someone says, you get the emotions behind it, and then you get the commitment behind it, and that will have maybe some of the opposition disappear from the communication. Also, for yourself, we talked about when a situation occurs to a certain way, you first, to be able to move past it, you have to be able to get what is the intention that might be being stopped or thwarted, what is the expectation that's being unfulfilled, and what is the communication that's being undelivered. If you can get that, and you can get that this all exists over here for you and how it occurs for you, it's the rest of the world doesn't care how it occurs to you, really. It's all about how it occurs to you, like your view of it, your perspective on all of it. You're the only one who's responsible for that. So if you can get that first, and then you can actually get to the heart of each of these, you can start separating your interpretations and your opinions, your point of view, from the actual, like, hard and fast facts of what is so. It starts to give you some freedom. So going into the second law of performance, how a situation occurs arises in language. We've been talking about that your situation, how you talk about something, how you will talk about it in your head and you think about it constantly, is how the situation occurs to you. Without language, if you were completely, like, had never experienced any language, you didn't have language, you would not be able to have the interpretations, the opinions, the everything else. You wouldn't be able to add meaning to, any situation. You wouldn't be able to add that extra to it. So, Sean, say a little bit about that. I'll give people the leadership corollary to that. The next one is, so the second law of performance is how a situation occurs arises in language. That's our interpretations, our opinions, our point of view, all the stuff we add to it. And then the leadership corollary to that is leaders master the conversational environment. So a visionary leader, we've talked about visionary leaders. That's why we talk about vision, is you think about Martin Luther King Jr. We talked about him on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. They speak in a way that impacts the conversational environment or the conversational domain. They actually have you. They change the conversation. They transform the conversation. Donald Trump is one of those kinds of leaders who does that. So, Sean, what are your thoughts about the second law of performance and its leadership corollary?
Yeah, so I was thinking about this. It's painting that picture, and I think about really when you do this well in politics, people can really get what is possible.
Mm-hmm.
And now, by the same token, you can also paint all the constrictions and restraints that are there, and some in politics are very good at telling you what can't be done.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
And they do this, and I love Kanye West calls this the mental prison.
mhm.
People get caught in their mental prison, and he's actually one of these people. He's a visionary leader who speaks things into existence, pretty powerful. But he talks about the mental prison. The constraints just come up. They're just like boom, 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 just like this. All these walls that people put up, and they keep themselves in their own mental prison. All they have to do is change the conversation, and they would be in a different world.
Yeah, and it really is whatever context you're creating. Um, Jimmy Carter created the misery index. I mean, you just picture it and it makes you frown, right?
Mhm.
You go, that's awful. But he painted the picture so well that it was easy to be turned on him 4 years later.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but when and by the way, he was living into that.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
Joe Biden this morning at the National Prayer Breakfast, that was his message, that we are in dark times. It's never been darker. That's what he talked about. I found it less than uplifting.
yeah, and there, and when you do that, uh, when you're successful at that, it has a dampening effect on everything around you.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it. Who do you like to hang out with? The people who, and we're not saying be fake about it.
Yeah.
But when you create what's possible, first you got to get what's in your way.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can say, "Hey, things look dire here," and look around and see what is possible in that.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you are going to live into this is the darkest time ever.
Yeah. And so darkest time, or these are dark times, that's all made up.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can be forgiven if you're like, "Oh, that's true. It's really true." No, it's not true. That cheapens truth if you say that is true. That is an interpretation. You could also look at it and say, you know what? We've developed a vaccine in less than a year right now. We have people who are completely changing how business is being done to be able to deal with the pandemic. We have huge advances in private industry participating in the space race. We have the Space Force now. Like, we're actually taking actions to win in space, which is the future of this country. Whoever is going to lead the world 100 years from now is the one who leads in space right now. So you could also come away with like, wow, we are really innovating right now. This is I love this comment from Women Reigniting American Patriotism. There is great opportunity for new leadership now. That's exactly right. This is the moment for people who are willing to step up and speak up and to lead. This is the time for that. You think back to the last great crisis moment in this country, the Great Depression and World War II. That's where we had the last host of like what was a generation of people that were viewed as really strong leaders. We call them the greatest generation for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a wonderful time for innovation. Yep, thank you. This is those are all. And when we talk about, this is partly what influences our conversation or our principle of seeing possibility where others only see constraint, and why we saw this in Donald Trump. This is partly why we were such fans early on, is that we knew that he was somebody who saw possibility where other people saw constraint. Be the light and run for office. Yeah, and that's what we're about. We're about, this is part of why we do this show. I don't know if I've talked about this, but our mission is to spark 1,000 points of light, not in the George H.W. way, but have 1,000 active leaders who are empowered, who are people who see possibility where other people see constraints, and are the kind of people who get that how they speak impacts the world. The former president, Donald Trump, he got that how he spoke affected the economy.
Yep.
He got that he could actually speak the economy into existence. And it was really as simple as that. How you talked about it was going to have an impact. You think of a Jimmy Carter or a Joe Biden, Jimmy Carter, Joe Biden, these folks, darkest time, misery index, they're speaking something into existence.
Yeah. Jimmy Carter also called it a malaise has fallen over the country.
Mm-hmm.
Can you think of just...
It's almost as though Joe Biden, Jimmy Carter, like this is the model. Like Joe Biden's model is Jimmy Carter. Like it's, I mean, they have names that are similar. Jimmy, Joe, Biden, Carter.
I don't know if
none of this is means anything. It's just.
Yeah, I don't know if Jimmy took a lunch pail to work every day, but
exactly. He brought a bag of peanuts, I think.
That's right.
Okay, so leaders master the conversational environment. Who are the conversational environment? That's Donald Trump. He's one of those people. Matt Gaetz is one of those people. And AOC, as much as I can't stand her. I saw this headline. I don't really want to get into this too much, but it's actually trending on Twitter right now. That's Alexandria Ocasio-Smollett.
Yeah,
Smollett. That is trending on Twitter right now. I don't have anything to state about that other than that is trending on Twitter. The famous Jussie Smollett.
That goes back to her comments about people trying to kill her during the.
I know. I just don't want to comment on it.
Yeah.
Right now.
For those in the audience who maybe have spared themselves from Twitter recently, I wanted to let you know what's going on there.
Yeah. So then the third law of performance is future-based language transforms how situations occur to people. And the leadership corollary to that is leaders listen for the future of their organization. So the law of performance is future-based language transforms how situations occur to people. This is why we're so big on creating your vision and actually standing out there in the future and looking back on what's happened and your vision being realized. And you think about people who either did this intentionally or maybe they just stumbled upon it. Martin Luther King Jr. is one of the best examples I can think of because he had a dream. He talks about his dream. He speaks his dream into existence. He talks about what the world would look like. And that had a powerful impact on people.
Yeah.
So this is what we're talking about when we talk about future-based language. We're talking about vision. Transforms how situations occur to people. Right now, future-based language that Joe Biden is using, that we're in a dark time, it's going to be a long, dark winter, as he said in the campaign. That is future-based language that has an impact on how situations occur to people right now. Now, if someone's trying to have you have a negative view of things, my personal opinion is if someone, it can be the case if someone's talking all positive and it's all happy talk, but if someone's trying to manipulate you into having a really negative view of the future, they're most likely manipulating you. And I would just say that I think Joe Biden is intentionally manipulating people, or people who pull the strings there are.
I think there's another thing going on there in particular, which is trying to lower expectations. Mm-hmm. Look, we had an economy.
Which is manipulation, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. I'm just saying, I think at least that's what I have as the view of the goal, because we had an economy that was, that was on a rocket ship. It was taking off. And it was even bouncing back from the pandemic. Mm-hmm. We were faring better here than most places. And it's a trajectory that they know they can't keep.
Yep.
Or they don't believe they can keep, and they have no intention of keeping. So that's the best way to do it, as far as that goes. I was thinking about other leaders that were really great at this. Gandhi, for example. I also think about Ronald Reagan.
Yeah.
He really painted a picture of what the future can look like. He talked about winning the Cold War. People were like, "Are you nuts?"
Yeah. They
You
had
know,
been so bought into this idea of détente, or that it's just going to always be this way.
yeah. And he was like, "No, that's not." And and Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall. Just think about that. That was no one wanted him to do that. Not one person. So I think really painting a future where these things, and Bill Clinton was also somebody who focused on the future.
Yeah.
Um,
There seemed to be a little bit of a lack of intention,
mhm.
a clear direction as to where he wanted things to go. But he was that way. To go through a list of people, we have a comment here. Winston Churchill transformed the world when he spoke to. That's a great example of somebody who really gets it. It's why Trump has definitely modeled himself on Winston Churchill. I think Cicero is another one we talked about recently. In December, we did a whole "Making Rome Great Again" in Cicero, and I do think the classical education that Trump had at the military academy, they talked a lot about Cicero, and you can tell that there's an influence there. But Winston Churchill, there's a lot of people who are really skilled at this. I'd put Cicero in that camp. I would put um, Donald Trump in that camp, Winston Churchill, Gandhi, as you mentioned, Martin Luther King Jr., um, Bill Clinton to a little bit of a lesser extent. I would not. I would say Obama in some ways, though he didn't really have a clear vision. I don't think it was usually he's using future-based language, but it was kind of um, a blank slate, is what he
Yeah,
was. He was letting you paint whatever picture you thought.
he never created what the future could look like.
Mm-hmm.
I do think these other folks, at least to some extent, um, uh, really created, like, here, no kidding, is what the future can look like.
Yep.
Um,
Steve Jobs, another
right.
suggestion someone has. He's by far one of the most powerful when it comes to business world, for sure. I would say he would be one of the singular people
Yeah.
who was able to do that. Edison would have been somebody who was like this. Inventors in general, people who are visionaries like that. Yeah, these are really powerful people who they really got how language impacts the world. By the way, it's not surprising that Steve Jobs and Apple are actually connected with this
Mm.
organization. Um, so leaders, this is the leadership corollary to the third law of performance. Future-based language transforms how situations occur to people. Leadership corollary 3, leaders listen for the future of their organization. So this might, you should read the book. Maybe sometime we'll see if we can have Steve Zaffron on to talk about the book. But leaders listen for the future of their organization. This is something I've talked about with Donald Trump in particular. It's one of the few we have currently. Elon Musk. Elon Musk is definitely one of these people. He's performing at a much higher level than most folks. But leaders listen for the future of the organization. I think about this in the political context, in cultural context, as zeitgeist, and listening for what is possible out there. And this is something that Donald Trump did. He would speak things out there, and then he would watch the shows. Everyone said, "Oh, he just watches TV." No, he would see like how it would play. He would watch the social media. He would see like what would bubble up. He'd also see what people are talking about. And one of the places where he listened for the future of the organization, that the organization in his case is the country. For years, we had this opioid epidemic happening. It's been going 20, 25 years, really, that this has been an issue. I remember when I first went to school in the late 90s in Southwest Virginia, close to the West Virginia border, on the Virginia side, but close to West Virginia. And in reading local newspapers about the various, you know, uh, drug running that was happening in these kind of Appalachian areas and whole counties where the sheriff may have been involved with the drug running and people who are addicted to OxyContin and the like. So this was like a big thing, but it rarely made it into the actual national news coverage, and it got really bad during the Obama years. And Obama had this amazing ability. He's definitely a manipulator. He could starve any news story of any kind of attention, and if he did that, then it wouldn't exist for people. The most infamous story that I can think of that I thought was just horrendous, and this is an interpretation, but I considered it evil at the time. The Tennessee floodings, if you remember, Nashville was underwater. It was the state was really having a hard time. So many people were impacted. Barack Obama never mentioned it once during his entire presidency, pretended like it didn't exist, didn't ever visit the state, never acknowledged the people, and it did not get coverage in the national news media. It would be really regional is the only place that got much coverage. And these people were really having a tough time. So you can starve attention. So the Obama folks completely starved the news media, starved any attention from the opioid epidemic. And Donald Trump, and I think really tapping into the zeitgeist, listening for the future of their organization was the possibility of actually ending the opioid epidemic. That's something he didn't necessarily come up with that. He just was listening for what would make a difference. This is what we've talked about, like looking for what might be missing, looking for possibilities where other people might see constraints, looking for what's missing, the presence of which might make a difference, or listening for what is needed and wanted out there. And Donald Trump did that with the opioid epidemic. And there's been a number of advances and things are happening. It's like the first time in a long time that there's actually been a reduction, and it's because of that. That's the case. It's the zeitgeist, like really listening for that is something that I think he did. We talk about it as feedback loops. That's one thing that we talk about in our campaigns. We try to put messages out there, but then we also try to listen for, is it making an impact? We listen to social media and our volunteers out there. We try to find out if we're actually having an impact with what we're talking about. Sean, what are your thoughts about this leadership corollary?
Yeah, well, look, I think this is really one that that you can develop as a powerful political leader, and look, these all make a difference. I think this one really can have an impact generationally if you're practicing it. The one thing I would say is one thing that we learned in the last 4 years is if President Trump had really hit on the last 5 years, if President Trump had really hit on something, you knew it was good because Democrats and the media didn't want to talk about it. Like the NFL and the kneeling and the Colin Kaepernick thing. He hit where an overwhelming majority of Americans were, and Democrats didn't want any part of it. They didn't want to talk about it. They hoped it would just go away.
And we're following on to that. I would like to think that it's all us, but he uncovered something. There is a starving of patriotism in this country. There is this people want to come together as Americans. People want to have these common ideals, to come back to that. There's this desire that people have to reignite American patriotism. And what he had done is he really got, and it even goes to, not that this is patriotic, but it is actually patriotic. It's something that's common, we all have. It doesn't matter if you're Jewish or Christian or whatever. Saying Merry Christmas around Christmas when you have all the Christmas decorations, it almost felt like a complete lie when you were surrounded by, boughs and bows and, Christmas decorations, that you couldn't say Christmas. It just seemed so insane. And he tapped into these things, that there's this strong desire to just actually have things that pull us together as opposed to pull us apart. And I think he nailed that with the kneeling. Is that something a president deals with? Well, in a way, yeah, he's the leader of the country. So being able to stand for patriotism is a pretty literally stand for patriotism is something that the president should speak on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really just being able to paint it, paint the picture, because I think about the Merry Christmas thing. He went out and he said, "We're going to be a country where you can say Merry Christmas again." And first the crowd loved it, but I think people got okay, and it transformed in that instant, even before he was elected. Like people are like, "Yeah, why don't we say that?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we used to say that. and we should now.
Yeah.
And, and I think it kind of just became a thing. So by 2016, people were saying it, and it wasn't going to get you fired from your job, and it wasn't going to whatever it happened in 2013 and 2011 and whatever. People are like, "Oh, good, you get to be a little bit more yourself."
Yeah.
And
get to be expressed, get to be free, be a little bit less fearful.
Yeah. And I think, I think we just we're ending up with a new crop of candidates, and which I think is great. I think having new people run for office, and guess what? Maybe you've posted things on social media that you're like, yeah, that wasn't the thing to post. But, I think, and you're thinking about running for office or whatever it is, I think just being straight with yourself, with those around you and the people, and say, hey, it's not like I woke up thinking I'm going to be running for office and I've based my whole life around it.
Yeah.
And so,
people are less afraid of taking the action.
Yeah.
And I say, as much as I don't like some things that some people maybe have said in the past, the fact that people feel that they can actually step up. This is partly what Donald Trump did. I'm just going to give one last reminder of the 3 laws and the corollaries. And I think this is a perfect case of where he transformed the context for political leadership in this country. One towards authenticity, one towards being fearless, one towards being, being American. So the first law, how people perform correlates to how situations occur to them. You mentioned people were worried about being fired if they said Merry Christmas. Well, people's actions are going to follow how that situation occurs to them. If I say Merry Christmas, oh my goodness, I'm going to, be affected. So people stopped saying Merry Christmas, not because they wanted to. There's a lot of people who they would have liked to have said Merry Christmas, but they thought they were going to get canned for it. So he, as a leader, Donald Trump, the leadership corollary, leaders have a say and give others a say in how situations occur. He came along and said, you get to say how you want this country to be run, right? That's what he did. And he said, well, if it's Merry Christmas, you get to say that if you want. You get to, be yourself. I think that was what we've seen with candidates, that they feel like they can be themselves, they can be authentic. We've watched it. We talk about it all the time, that Ted Cruz is the perfect example of the guy who went from being a complete fake, really, to being a lot more of himself in the last few years. So President Trump gave people the ability to do that. And then the second law of performance, how a situation occurs, arises in language. We saw that Donald Trump would do this. He did most of his job from Twitter and speaking to camera and affecting how the filter, giving people a filter for how to see all this stuff. And it says leaders master the conversational environment. Anything else you'd like to add when it comes to the candidates running? Because that's what we're...
Yeah, well, I think about Ronald Reagan and how he really set the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I do not suggest others do this unless you're actually good at it. Mm-hmm. But he would tell a joke and it would disarm folks, and then he'd go into the meat of it, and he'd be jovial and whatnot, and with a smile on his face, he'd stick the dagger in. Mm-hmm. He'd start with some self-deprecating humor, and then, I think about the speech on to the joint session of Congress shortly after he was shot. And he told some jokes to get going, and then he basically said, "And now you're going to pass my tax plan." Mm-hmm. and I'm going to barnstorm the country to make it happen.
Yeah.
With Tip O'Neill sitting behind him, having to grin and laugh and whatnot, knowing that almost all of that speech was directed at him and House Democrats to pass his plan. So, but he, not only did he paint a picture, but he really created the environment where,
Yeah. So
yeah.
so he created how people are being also.
Mm-hmm.
But how a situation occurs arises in language. This is something that Trump got. He could speak the economy into existence. He could speak Merry Christmas back into existence. That he could actually master the conversational environments. Why he tweeted his most interesting tweets at 4 a.m. because it's going to affect the news media the rest of the day. And it's why he took on these things that really weren't a matter of law or policy, but Merry Christmas and kneeling at football games instead standing for your flag. These are things that he spoke about, and he mastered the conversational environment such that what he's been modeling the whole time, and it's sad to see them try to totally cancel him, is he's been modeling be fearless, step up, speak out, be somebody who actually says things of consequence. And so you see people, and it's a little bit messy. There's some people who say things that you don't like. Oh my goodness. Well, that's fine. AOC is partly part of this legacy. She's somebody who's been willing to step up and say what she thinks. And so that's going to be part of it. Donald Trump helped create that because he made it okay for people to say what they're actually thinking on both sides. More so than it had been. And there's a counter reaction to that at this point. And then the third law of performance, future-based language transforms how situations occur to people. And we talk about this all the time. When you bring that vision, when you bring a whole new filter, a whole new lens, a paradigm shift to a situation, you can barely see how it used to be.
Yep.
I think Donald Trump did that.
Yeah. Yeah. And when it changes, we went from there's no way he'll ever put a man on the moon to, oh, hey, there's a man on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess we need to keep sending people into space and doing whatnot. So I think so just looking at those types of things throughout time, the heading out west, the new frontier.
Mm-hmm.
It's in our blood, and we need to embrace it, and that's the opportunity we have.
Well, I see that. So the future-based language transforms how situations occur to people. He spoke in a way that people believed that they could speak up themselves, and this is something that just occurred to me. This isn't along the lines of what we've been talking about, but future-based language transforms how situations occur to people. He did this with Operation Warp Speed. And he listened for the future of the organization. He listened for what was possible within the federal government, within industry. He just listened. So whether people believed it or not, he was listening to, is this even possible? And he saw that it was, even if the people who had to implement it didn't see it. He spoke it into existence. And you can't just do this Pollyanna, but he clearly saw that it was possible, that people could do it, and he just kept speaking into existence. And the biggest problems that we're seeing now are the people who just were unwilling. CNN fact checked him and said it was a lie to say it could be done before the end of the year, which is crazy to think that they could say that about an opinion. However, the media, the way they covered this topic and the way the governors reacted to it, they just didn't believe that it was possible. And when Donald Trump kept saying that it was going to be possible and it happened, the governors and the people who needed to implement it, because they had bought into the fake news lie, they weren't prepared for it. And so now we're in a situation where the governors and the states and the local municipalities and other local governments are just not in a position to get it done because they didn't think they were going to be called on the carpet to do something at this point. That's my take on it. So anyway, those are the three laws of performance and leadership corollaries, and we'll put this on the blog as a place you can go and get the PDF. We'll see about having Steve Zaffron on at some point. I want to get a couple of comments people had about like disappearing, real things happening out there. This was a comment that happened to us during Hurricane Francis. CNN came in and taped hurricane coverage before the hurricane with light rain, and replayed it over and over again. This was done to reduce FEMA payouts. Now, that's your assumption. You don't know that for a fact, but that is probably likely the case, to be clear about it. I want to just point this out. So Naomi, who knows me from way back, this is a fun comment. So speaking of people from your past, my kids would like to remind you of your first campaign manager job at Lyman High School when you did a take on Saturday Night Live while campaigning for a student council president candidate. LOL, just having fun with you. So I was on student council and all that, but what I really enjoyed was running the campaigns for people. And it wasn't a real campaign. It would be a all student assembly, and you'd have to do a skit. And this is where I first you have to get people's attention, intention, and retention. So you had to get the attention, you had to shape what people thought, and then you had to stick in their mind. So I would do a performance. I did one time, I did an impression of Kramer and dressed up like him, and anyway, that was interesting, and it got people's attention. And then I did David Letterman, and I did a top 10 list. I interviewed the candidate and did a monologue and things like that. And so I would get people's attention. And of course, the candidates would win. Didn't matter what the policies were. Whoever had me as a campaign manager always won, and that's what happened. So a perfect case of our theory of communication. You have to get attention. 100% of communication is attention. Get their attention. Be interesting. That's the failure of Marjorie Taylor Greene's opponent in her primary, is they didn't get the attention of the electorate. So it may not be fair, but I don't know. A skit might be the thing you need to do to win your campaign.
Well, I'd like to see the Lyman High School white papers, white sheets, but
said no one ever. Well, very good. I'd like to just remind people, if you'd like to be a Political Trade Secrets insider, you'd like to get a little bit more of the good stuff, go to politicaltradesecrets.com, sign up, get exclusive stuff. Also, make sure you can be able to watch the show no matter what, even when our big tech overlords shut down the entire internet and force us all to join the Chinese Communist Party. You can still get access to us if you go to politicaltradesecrets.com while you can and sign up. And with that, Sean, would you like to tell people about the other ways they can make a difference in the world?
Absolutely. Look, do you like running for office? And as Naomi said, yes, you always won. So fun. So, hey, you like that being part of your campaign? Join us at olsonstrategies.com, OLSON strategies.com. Love to have a conversation with you about running for office, or how you can be an impactful political leader in your community, the state, the country, and even the world. Email me, Sean, SEAN at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com, and reach out to us today. We're also proud to be sponsored by Grassfire. What do they do? Canvassing, petitioning, live calling. They're good. If you need to connect with someone on their doorstep, in front of the grocery store, or over the phone, it's Grassfire, www.grassfire.us. They also fuel 10centtexting.com. This is your way to connect with voters or constituents right where they are on their mobile device. Look, 82% of people open every text message they get. Why not have it be impactful? Why not have it actually have a lasting impact on them? So reach out to 10centtexting.com. They literally wrote the book on political texting. Go download it today.
All right, tinsandtexting.com.
Yes.
And thank you, Sean, for the great reminder about all of our sponsors and how people can make a difference out there. And I know I can speak for everybody here that it's really great to have you on the show today. It's been a lot of fun. I've done my best to do it without you this week. However, it's so much more fun to have somebody here with me, and it really has made a difference for me in doing this. I would be exhausted at this point, by the way, if there wasn't someone to handle some of the load.
Well, I'm really glad to be back. Really appreciate all the well wishes. And as Dustin said, on the family side of things, we were going through something there, and my dad passed peacefully on Tuesday. And really just appreciate all the kind words and support out there. So thanks for that.
Well, there's a lot of love for you in this audience, and a lot of people who appreciate your leadership, and they get the impact that your dad had in your life and on so many people in this world, and appreciate all the Bartleys. So thank you for sharing your life with us.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that. So I have a request here about the Share Force rocket. So we and people are saying they love you, and it's heartfelt. So thank you for the difference that you make. So with the Share Force rockets, we'll bring that back right here, because this is how to make the biggest difference that you can in getting the message out there. In the last 2 days, Facebook has decided to crack down on political groups. And how we got the message to so many people in the Trump world, we're on all the different Trump pages, the groups, and they now have made it so during the show we can't share the live feed, because they've added like 4 different steps now. So you can't share it to more than one easily. So your ability to go and share our show on different places of people who really are seeking to be self-expressed, seeking to actually have their voices heard, seeking to be political leaders, you helping go share that really makes a difference. So with that in mind, join ShareForce, make a difference, and reignite American patriotism. We really do thank you for being here today with us. We know that you could be spending your time doing anything in the world, and you've chosen to be here with us, and that really makes a difference. Sean, any last thoughts before we wrap up today's show?
No, we really do appreciate it, and appreciate all of you sharing what's going on out there. And we just appreciate the opportunity to bring this information to you, and being able to share it and have an impact on all those out there. So thanks for that, and thanks for listening and watching.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Sean. We'll see you on Monday, and I'll be back tomorrow. And thank you all very much for participating in Political Trade Secrets. See you tomorrow at roughly around 11 a.m. Eastern Time.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes, and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecret.com.